Welcome to FBB Forum. If you like this content, please be sure to like and subscribe to the FBB Forum YouTube and Instagram pages. I'm very pleased to welcome the amazing IFBB Pro Women's Physique and Figure Masters athlete, Jeanette Martin, to the podcast. Jeanette is a breast cancer survivor and has a PhD in public health and works as a statistician for some health companies, some major health companies as a consultant. She most recently competed in the Masters 55 plus categories for both women's physique and figure at the Atlantic Coast in Fort Lauderdale. Jeanette has been competing in bodybuilding since 2014 and earned her pro card ×2 in 2022. And she has a tremendous physique and lots of beauty. Welcome to FBB Forum, Jeanette. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's amazing to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you. And I look forward to sharing, and hopefully people will be interested in what we're discussing.
Oh, and thank you very much. And I really appreciate you taking the time because I know you're moving right now. So
Yes, it's my pleasure. Listen, my sport is in my heart. It's part of my heart. So if there's anything connects me more to the bodybuilding universe, I always make time for it. So I'm glad we were able to find the time.
at least you're moving within your building, so that makes life a
Yes,
little
that's
easier.
that's a that's a plus for sure. Bigger unit, nice, more space. So, yeah, definitely.
Very nice. That's great. Now, I was curious, how did you get started in bodybuilding?
It's a very interesting history. I've always been athletic, never really a team sports person, just kind of my own individual uh, sports. Always exercise, was a runner, was a big endurance athlete. I'm from New Jersey originally, and I connected with actually the very first figure Olympia winner when the division was created. Her name is Devonna Medina. She used to work out at the Gold's Gym in Totowa, New Jersey, and she and I became friends. And I watched her evolution, as she was preparing for shows. And of course, figure was very different back then, than it is
Yeah.
now. And she said, you should really try this bodybuilding thing. I think you have great genetics and structure. And I always kind of put it to the back of my mind and poo-pooed it. But as the years went by, and eventually I, moved down to Florida after I got my PhD, we've stayed in touch. Devonna and I have stayed in touch. And, I said, I think I'm going to take your advice. And, what direction do you think I should go? And she said, well, I don't think they had physique at the time. I don't recall, but figure was the direction that I took. It seemed logical because she was a figure Olympian winner. And I was asking her for advice. So that was kind of what got me motivated to take it from the gym to the stage.
And how old were you when you started competing?
My very first show was, I want to say it was the Fort Lauderdale Cup in 2014, where I can't remember my placing. I think it was definitely top three. And I was like, wow, at 47, which to me now is young because I just turned 59, right?
Wow.
I thought this is really cool. I got a big cup, and a trophy, and I was so excited about that. And I was exhilarating, that feeling of like all that hard work I did um, was so validated, and I didn't know much then. I was kind of doing my own prep. I didn't really know what to do. And so I knew after that experience, I wanted to sort of set myself up for success. So I
Okay.
started seeking out coaching, and, I said, all right, when's the next show? I got to work on improving. I got to work on posing. So I learned that there were many different elements just from competing once. It's about total presentation and not just the muscles, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's kind of how my bodybuilding career took off.
That's terrific. That's really exciting. I was curious, is there anybody that you really look up to now that you're kind of aspiring to in terms of current competitors?
I have so many ladies and men that I really respect and have met, through bodybuilding. And, there really is no one in particular. I think it's just the folks that I connect with that have been my support system, regardless of placing or regardless of, any of that. They've always stuck by me and said, we support you. We're with you 100%. And they're competitors as well. Natalia, obviously, Coelho is someone that I adore. She could be my daughter. She's super young, but she's one of the most humble and gracious athletes I've ever met.
Yeah.
Um, and I just really enjoyed meeting her. I was first time I met her face to face was at Atlantic Coast. So,
Oh,
she's
cool.
someone as a physique athlete, I really admire. And obviously that is her career and her life. But I don't aspire to be like anyone except me. I want to be the best version of me. My expectations of the sport are realistic. You know what I mean?
Sure.
At
Yeah.
my age, the window's getting very small, so I have to be
Yeah.
realistic about that too. I want to be respectful to athletes that are competing and not just be up there because I can still walk in high heels. You know what I'm
Um,
saying?
yeah.
Some people don't know when to cut the cord, and
Yeah.
my support system, they will be honest with me and say, "You know what, Jeanette, you need to like hang up the suit now. It's time to move on to something else." And that's what you need is people that are going to be honest with you.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. I saw you compete at Atlantic Coast, and yeah, you definitely belong up there on stage. You looked really fantastic. So,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It was a
yeah.
great experience.
Now you're doing figure and women's physique now. Do you have like a preference for one over the other, or what's an advantages over one of the over the other for you?
Well, here's the thing, when I went to Pittsburgh in 2022 after my chemo and after my surgeries and the cancer was in the rearview mirror, I thought, okay, I'm torn because coaches always tell me my structure is better for physique or bodybuilding, but
Hmm.
I liked wearing the high heels because there was something
Uh-huh.
very feminine about that. And I think honestly, I was always a little intimidated by the physique posing. It
Okay.
scared me to death. Quarter turns and mandatories I can handle, but take the shoes off and say you got to have a routine. And I was like, oh, I was like kind of terrified. So when I went to
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, I said, I'm going to cross over into both categories and I'm going to see what happens. I know I'm going to get a pro card this show, but I just need some clarification which direction to go. So when I won the overalls in both and I got the pro cards in both, that kind of it confused me even more because I thought, "Man, this is unusual that they would do this,
Yeah.
in the same national show." So I did speak to the judges and they said, the reality is you look the best in both categories today. So that's why you walked off stage with two pro cards and two overalls. So
Yeah.
you could go in either direction. Um, we think collectively that physique is probably your strength
Okay.
because of your structure, genetic
Okay.
structure, bone structure, all of that.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that really is where I was leaning. However, this year was my pro debut. So I thought, let me see how I do in both. And the feedback was the same, except they said, you're sacrificing progress and probably higher placings in physique because you're crossing over into figure. So, there is a clear line of demarcation
Yeah.
um, between the two. So you have to make a decision, but if you do, it should be physique. So after Atlantic Coast, same feedback. I said, all right, I'm going to stay with physique. I'm done with figure. Going to hang
Okay.
up the shoes and move in the direction of just becoming in really peeled, really conditioned, a little bit more size, so I can focus on physique. So that's where my head is at now. So I think it helped just give me a sense of direction, so I'm not so conflicted.
I got you. I understand. As a fan, I like physique better because you get to do the routine. I think it's neat.
Correct. Now I can embrace that because our structure is very different. I'm never going to have a tiny waist.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'm just genetically different than some of the figure girls. So with physique posing, as you know, you can manipulate the body to look the way you want it, basically.
Yeah.
So there's
Mhm.
there's a lot of beauty in that. And if you have the right posing coach, I work with Kenny Wallach, and that helped a ton. Really made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So I think now that I'm staying in my lane, I'll have a very successful, 2025. I think your first year of pro debut is kind of like getting the nerves out and not feeling intimidated. And, it's a
Yeah.
different world you're stepping into. It's not the NPC amateur level anymore. It's totally different.
Yeah.
Even. At the masters level.
Yeah. That's tough
So
competition at the
yeah.
masters level. Yeah. Was Atlantic Coast your pro debut, or
No,
did you show
Daytona
early?
was, and I did the
Oh,
same
that's
thing,
right.
I crossed over.
Hmm.
Really loved the Daytona show, I'm gonna do it again next year. I thought the promoter was gracious and kind, it was well organized. I can't say I had the same experience for Atlantic Coast. I think it was
Hmm.
a lot of the pros were kind of, disappointed because it was just everybody was mixed together in the back, there was a lot of confusion.
Hmm.
So it was not, for all intents and purposes, not the best experience, but I just won't do that show next year. I'll give somebody else my money. Anybody will take your money.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
Michael in Daytona runs a really nice show. He separated the pros and the amateurs 2 different days, which I think you should do.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and so I think that works out better for all the athletes and the people. That we bring with us.
Yeah. I think, wasn't it Atlantic Coast? I think on or was it Saturday or Sunday that everything kind of ran a little bit late, and I think y'all
A
are
little. It was 2 hours late.
2 hours late.
So
That's
we
right.
were
So
crammed back there,
yeah,
with the expectation that things were going to move along. And I just think that they should have done the pros separately, the naturals separately, and the NPC separately.
yeah, I got you. I
That would have
understand.
been a lot. I think
Hmm.
it would have produced a more positive experience for pros,
Yeah,
because we all bring money in. We don't just bring ourselves, we bring our families, we bring our coaches. So, I just kind of feel like things could have been a little bit more organized. The venue was great. I think that they could have utilized a little bit more space there, but in terms of organization, like you have to pick the promoters that give you the best experience, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. That's
And
true.
I love Daytona Beach, and I just thought that was really well organized. So I'll probably next year do Daytona, and I'm gonna go to Pittsburgh in August for Masters International. I love Gary Udit shows too. He's, well organized. It's all about organization, um, and timing. You got to keep everybody on schedule.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed that too about it being really late, and as a
Oh,
fan too, the fan is like, like, gosh, gotta
yeah,
wait
of
all these.
course. I mean, you've got all these people sitting in the audience having to wait for 2 extra hours. That's not
Yeah,
reasonable,
yeah,
and
I know.
it's hard. I mean, some of the people that came couldn't stay because it was just too late. It was just, it was
Yeah.
too late.
Oh, I understand. One just gripe with that show too, is that the tickets are really fragmented. They're
Yes,
and
yes,
it
they
ends up
are.
being very expensive if you try to see everybody you really want to see, and you have to, if you're on a budget, you have to really kind of make decisions on how to break that up. But I don't
Yeah,
necessarily agree with that either. I would rather see an all-day ticket that's reasonably priced, and you probably get more people in the audience that way too. So,
agree. I agree. And that's why the seating, the audience was not full, for that reason. And you don't see that at Gary shows or Michael shows. The capacity is pretty much filled because it's a different situation. It is a day
mhm.
pass. You buy a ticket, you get a
Yeah,
VIP, you get to go to all the, it's just more convenient. And again, every promoter has a different approach. I just didn't care for that. So, I just won't
yeah,
do it again.
yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier too before we started recording about they they had a really challenging was to get there because there were cruise ships that were docked right next door, and it really, the traffic jam was terrible. And I worried about some of the athletes being late because they couldn't get through the traffic jam or they weren't expecting it. So I was curious if
Yeah.
you know of athletes who unfortunately got there late or
No, fortunately, nobody that I know, but I'm certain that people were impacted by that for sure.
yeah.
Again, I live very close to the venue, so it didn't impact me. I stayed at the hotel, but
Okay.
I think um the venue was probably, from a financial perspective, the right move for the promoter, but it
Yeah.
wasn't the right move for us at all.
Uh-huh.
Fortunately, it was close though. I mean, we could walk, to and from the venue from the hotel,
Yeah,
and weather was great. So that was a plus, is that
that's true.
we could do that too. So that was, that made things a little bit more convenient.
I do think from a just a fan perspective and also for athlete perspective to give a warning about those cruise ships because I don't know that people necessarily
No, they don't
expect
know
them
that that's a cruise port. That's a main.
to.
I did because I live here, so I
Yeah.
knew. But if you're coming from Texas or California or, up north, you have no idea that that's a major cruise port.
Hmm.
So it could be problematic even getting an Uber or a Lyft, really
And
tough.
some you're kind of sharing the same parking garage too. So it's just that
Yes, you
it
are.
was just a
Yes.
mess. Yeah. I
Yeah,
ultimately
it
ended
was
up
not great. Yeah.
parking under the bridge there and that actually was the best place to park and
Yeah.
it just was
Yeah.
it was crazy.
Yeah, I heard.
Oh man, no, it's good that you knew in advance
Yep,
what to
yep,
expect.
I did. Yeah.
Um, now, uh, in terms of the Daytona Pro and making your pro debut, I bet that was pretty exciting for you. I bet. What was that experience like?
It was nerve-wracking. I didn't really have any expectations because I think the reality is, you can't go into these things as a newbie expecting to sweep, first place in overall.
Yeah,
People, this sport, as you evolve in this sport, there's a little bit of loyalty, there's a little bit of politics, there's a little bit of bureaucracy. This is life, though. It's not just in bodybuilding, it's across the board in the world. This is what happens in our world. So
yeah,
we know this when we sign up for things, right? That
yeah,
you could be subjected to some of that. And you can't let that dissuade you because, as I said, before we started this, pictures don't lie. And
hmm.
that can be validating, and so
That's
I
true.
think from my perspective, I just needed to get that out of the way. I needed to have a good first experience so that I felt like, okay, now I'm a pro. Now I can go in and I still need to find my path, figure, physique, but now I know. And that experience was so good with the promoter, the venue, the goodie bags were amazing. I mean, he had separate dressing rooms for pros and, it was really well done.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah,
really well done. And so that made it overall a great experience,
yeah,
as a first
mhm,
timer. So I think everybody has to kind of get those jitters, out of the way and
yeah,
realize that, when you start to think and act like a pro, that's when you start to embrace the idea that, like, oh yeah, I actually got my pro card and I am a professional bodybuilder. It takes a while to sink in,
yeah.
it takes a
Uh-huh.
while to sink in, and I think for someone with my background, just having had cancer 2 years before, it was even more hard to believe that I got to that level. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? I think my experience is unique because of that. I
yeah,
really had to push hard, and I was limited because I'm on cancer medication. So there's lots of protocols I can't go near certain things because
sure.
I don't want to take the risk.
Yeah,
And
I understand.
so yeah, so I think everybody's case is very unique, but that was a very good first experience for me for sure.
That's terrific. Yeah, I went to that show for the first time last year and really enjoyed it. It is a really good show, and
It's fabulous. I mean,
yeah,
he does a great job. He's wonderful. He's
mm,
so appreciative. He comes around and speaks to all the athletes. He thanks us. He takes pictures with us. And, I didn't have the same experience at Atlantic Coast,
mm,
so not that
yeah,
I expect a pat on the back, but, I think it
mm,
says a lot when a promoter says, hey, thank you for coming to my show and spending $500 to compete in my show. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? It would just
That's
be
true.
nice.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
yeah, make you feel welcome too, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's quite different in Europe, and I'm sure if you interview European
mm,
bodybuilders or people that go to Europe to compete, they will tell you they treat bodybuilders like celebrities there. It's totally different
yeah.
experience,
I think that the fans do too, and I think there's
Yes,
louder fan reaction and audience
very much
reaction.
so. Yeah.
I'm always
Yep.
amazed, like at the American bodybuilding shows, how quiet it is, especially for the
Mhm.
pros. And I'm like, well, these are the best of the best. Like, why are they
Yeah.
getting the hoots and the hollers and stuff?
Yeah, agree, for sure.
Um, um, I was just curious, now that you've got your pro card and you got a couple of shows under your belt, if there's any advice that you could provide the ladies who are seeking to earn their pro card, and what kind of talk about it from your journey.
Well, you know, the advice that I would give anybody, but particularly, if you're just starting out, whether you're masters or whether you're not, I think you got to keep your expectations reasonable. And I think you really need to have the right coach because
Hmm.
everybody says they're a coach. Just because you're an IFBB pro does not make you a coach. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Just because I'm a cancer survivor doesn't mean I'm an expert in cancer, you
Hmm.
know? So
Yeah,
I think you see a lot of this on social media. And unfortunately, people get connected with the wrong coach that doesn't understand pharmaceuticals. They don't understand the mixture. They don't understand dosing. They don't understand diet. They don't understand sodium. There's so much that goes into this. And they don't understand how to read labs. So if you don't have a coach that's asking you for blood work every 8 weeks, you need a new coach.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I would say you've got to speak to pros about look at the bodies that you admire and find out who their coaches are because
Okay.
clearly they're doing something right. Find
Yeah,
out if the athlete's been healthy, have they been sick, um, you follow athletes and you know what's going on in their life. They're on social media all the time. So
yeah.
I did a lot of that, and some of the really strong physique and bodybuilding competitors and figure were all using Shelby Starnes,
Okay.
and I connected with a few girls in Pittsburgh that said, "Listen, this guy, he's ultra conservative, but he's incredibly responsive. He has a very strong female base, as you know,
Yeah,
and he produces results. There's no drama. It's never about him. It's always about his client, and
great.
that's what I like. He doesn't have to push himself out there,
Yeah,
because athletes go to him. He
that's
doesn't
true.
need to he doesn't need to promote himself on social media. You never see that. You always see photos of his winning athletes,
Yeah,
all the
that's
way from
great.
the age of 25 up to 58. He had a 56-year-old in Olympia. That's the first time in history
Hmm.
that
Wow.
happened. So I think you gotta set yourself up with a good coach, and you've gotta interview them, and you've gotta know what questions to ask, and, you also have to be honest with your primary care physician
Yeah,
about what you're doing. Are you gonna be on PEDs? If so, who's judging? But be honest, because that's bodybuilding. At the IFBB level, everybody's using something. It's
yeah,
not wrong, it's a selective, calculated risk that people take, and you go on, you come off. But you have to have a primary care physician that understands that. So when they see certain levels rising, they say, oh, okay, like I know this is your competition season. Let's make sure we donate blood, which is a good thing to do. So you got to have a relationship with your doctor and you've got to have good coaching, period. End of story. That will put you on the right path.
that's good advice. On kind of elaborating on the PCP question, um, it is that a concern, do you think, for the athletes because they'll say the PCP will say, I'm not going to work with you if you're doing these PEDs because they're worried about your health or worried about you getting sick under their watch or whatever? Or,
Well, as someone that's very familiar with the medical community, I've never known a doctor to say no because they're going to collect a fee from insurance.
yeah,
To them, you're a patient. There's no emotional involvement, and they're not prescribing, bodybuilding drugs to you. They're doing lab work. They're making sure they're monitoring your health.
yeah,
So my answer to that would be, listen, if your primary care physician says they don't want to work with you because you're a professional bodybuilder, find another PCP. There's dozens of them out there.
yeah.
I mean, I've had to be honest with my oncologist, my cancer doctor. I've had to be honest with my PCP, my primary care physician. And I have no qualms about that. I don't, it is a personal choice that people
Yeah.
make. you
That's
know?
true.
And
Yeah.
if you look at all of the people in this country that are on a prescribed medication indefinitely for a chronic condition like diabetes or heart disease or, high cholesterol, something like that, that's a forever thing.
Yeah.
Bodybuilders, we make a choice to use certain things to enhance our sport as all professional athletes do
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not a taboo subject anymore. Everybody
Yeah.
knows. It's like
That's true.
cosmetic surgery. Everybody gets it, like come on, we gotta
Yeah.
we gotta get past that BS. And
Yeah. I
so
got you. Yeah.
my feeling is find a primary. I think a primary will appreciate your honesty. I think
Yeah.
that they're going to say, okay, cool. You're keeping it real with me. I'm going to keep it real with you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And that should be how that relationship works. But regardless of age, if you're young or if you're masters, you should still be getting a physical and getting your blood work done every 8 to 10 weeks,
Okay. Yeah.
regardless.
That's
It's
good
extreme.
advice.
It is an
Yeah.
extreme sport, puts a lot of stress on the vital organs. So there's a lot of things that you can't see happening that your blood will tell a story. And your primary will know what tests to ask for. They'll
Okay.
know, okay, you know what, let me do a GGT liver toxicity test. That's not a normal metric that you get during an annual physical. They'll know to ask for, let me look for T3, let me look for DHEA, let me look for all these cortisol, right?
Uh-huh.
So I think it could be a great relationship, and can
Yeah.
really be helpful to your coach if your coach understands labs.
That's great. That's really good advice. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. And thank you for it's good to get your perspective on that
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Bodybuilders should have a coach that understands
Mm.
what every lab means, how to interpret, like, what does all this mean? If you send your labs to your coach and they think it's Chinese, you need a new coach.
Hmm. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's all in the blood, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've heard that from other competitors too.
Yes,
And yeah, I think that's a smart way to go about competing in bodybuilding, just to make sure that you're
absolutely.
healthy.
Liver function, kidney function, all affected,
Hmm.
high dose, low dose, it doesn't matter, So you're going to put yourself at unnecessary risk if you're not looking at what's happening inside, you know,
Yeah.
because we're so focused on the outside with bodybuilding that we forget, oh, hey, maybe I should go get my blood work done, you know? Um,
Yeah. And we
and, that's why I think, again, I can't emphasize enough having a coach that understands that is really important.
Yeah, that's true. And there's been, fair number of deaths in the industry
Yes.
too, which
Yes,
is
and
kind of
that's
sad.
from, it's not from what they're taking, it's the combinations and it's the dosing.
Yeah.
And everybody is different. Your labs are gonna look different than my labs, right?
Yeah.
So, dosing is gonna be very different for people. Some people may use a diuretic, others may not need a diuretic, So, you don't know what's happening until you see the blood work. So it's so
Yeah.
critical, so critical. If there's anything that anyone gets out of this discussion, please make sure that your coach understands lab work
Okay.
because that has to happen.
Yeah, I understand. No, yeah, I appreciate that. Now I was curious, how long have you worked with Kenny and with Shelby?
I started working with Shelby in 2021, right after my cancer treatment was over.
Okay.
I reached out because my body was a wreck. I mean, it was, I had chemo. So it's like I was pumped full with toxins and I needed to kind of detox my body, come out of that. So he got me on an off season sort of cleansing diet, put me on some good, supplements, regular over the counter stuff, not much. And very, very conservative cardio and training protocol. And slowly, my body bounced back, but it took a year. He said, I want you to take a year off. And then 2022, we're going to go for it. And that's when he said, in 2022, if we're going to do nationals, I want you to connect with Kenny Wallach. And when I did, it was like a match made in heaven. I mean, I've referred so many of my friends to Kenny, and he's made a huge difference, really.
Oh yeah.
So they're like the dream team. They work well together, and it's been. I have a level of trust with Shelby because of everything I've been through,
Hmm.
and he's been very sensitive to that.
Okay.
And, so I feel like he would never put me at risk, unnecessarily. And again, at the end of the day, your coach is not going to force you to do anything, it's up to you. If you say, geez, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Okay, we won't do it, you know,
Yeah.
um, and I've always had that kind of relationship with my coach, and everyone I know who preps with him has the same exchange. It's the same relationship, same experience. So,
Okay. Great.
it's
Yeah.
and that got me to nationals, got me 2 pro cards, 2 overalls. So if it's working, why mess with it? I
Yeah.
mean, it's a great thing.
That's true. No, yeah, you can't argue with success. I mean, it's yeah,
No,
that's
exactly.
awesome.
And trust, that's a big thing
Yeah.
too, is the trust factor is huge, with I think people make a mistake in when they fail or they don't get the right placing, they switch coaches.
Hmm.
And it's never the coach, it's always the athlete that's doing
Yeah.
something wrong, or they're talking to some gym bro, or they're looking on the internet and saying, well, they're saying this. Then don't pay a coach.
Hmm.
Don't pay a coach. Just do your research on the internet. If you're going to question everything your coach says, what's the
Hmm.
point of having a coach? You'd be amazed at
Yeah.
how successful you can be if you listen to your coach.
Yeah. Yeah. Since I started this podcast 2 years ago, I've been amazed by all the coach switching that happens, and
It's nuts.
it's
I just have never
sometimes.
seen anything like it. The placing has nothing to do with the coach. The feedback. Now, if you don't take the judge's feedback back
Mm-mm.
to your coach and they say, you know what, you got to come in a little tighter, a little more condition. Okay, then they know to pull you harder. They know to do certain things differently, but you have to get that feedback, you
Yeah,
know?
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good point. Good advice too. Excuse me. I was curious, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of competition prep for you?
Um, I think just having to be laser focused and, you know, um, saying no to a lot of things that I love, like peanut butter. And I'm not a big junk food person, but my idea of having a treat would be like, hey, throwing some peanut butter and raisins on a rice cake,
Oh,
but
nice.
you can't do that, or bananas, you'd be, you're cutting so many things. It's so restrictive that
Mm-hmm.
I think the most challenging thing is coming out of that and going back into a reverse diet,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
getting back, integrating some of the things that you would normally eat, like bananas or fruits or, yogurts or whatever could be part of your off season.
Uh-huh.
Psychologically is very difficult. And I would imagine it could be different for men versus women, because
Yeah, I
you
understand.
look your best when you step off stage and you don't want to lose that. And so it's very hard to now suddenly go into eating 3,500 calories a day when you've been eating 1,500. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I know.
What do you
Yeah.
mean? I can have a banana. I can have some Greek yogurt. You feel like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do that. So I think
Yeah.
the psychological aspect is by far the most challenging. Um,
Yeah, I understand.
Most of us as bodybuilders do well with structure because we live by structure, right? We work according to a schedule. We schedule meetings according to a schedule. We eat by schedule. So everything is very ritualistic. And
Hmm.
I think human beings adapt to that really well. So when you have to switch it up and now you're doing things differently, it can be a shock to your psychological system. And I think that
Yeah.
is for sure, when your shorts are a little tighter and you're like, wait a minute, I don't have six pack, I have like a four pack now. It's adjusting to that and acclimating to that change, which is necessary, but it's very difficult
I
for a
understand.
lot of people. A fun thing that my other competitor friends and I do, my gal friends, we have, like, in the off season, we have fat picture challenges. So
Uh-huh.
as we all start getting fluffy and chunky, we send pictures of each other, like who has the best fat picture, like who has the most, meat hanging over their waistband. And it's the funniest thing. We get such a kick out of it. Like, oh,
That's
look at
cute.
my back fat. You're trying to take these god awful videos that you would never share these with anybody. And we're just dying. We're sending pictures of the worst possible positions that you put yourself in to
Yeah.
make yourself look horrible, you know?
Okay.
And it's fun. It's a
That's
fun
cute
way
though.
to transition into the off season. So I'm looking forward to that.
I got you. That is kind of cute too. I
The
like
fat
that.
pictures. Yeah,
Do
they're funny. Funny, funny, funny. Hang
you
on, my
ever?
dog wants to say hello. This is Fireball.
Oh, look at that cutie. Oh my
Hi,
goodness.
what
Is
are you
that a
doing?
pug?
It's a pug. I have 2
Yeah.
black ones, yeah.
Oh yeah. What a cutie. Yeah. He's such a cute dog. I love, yeah, well, pugs are so cute.
Yeah, they're very special. They're very special breed.
Yeah, very loving. Yeah. I was curious, do you ever get like the post-show blues, do you think? Like, I've heard that happens a lot with, and I think that's um a combination of like maybe stepping off the stage and after being kind of looking like a superhero, and then you're going back to looking normal, but then um on top of that, kind of getting off the PEDs and stuff too, I think kind of affects your brain a little bit.
Absolutely, and, I think it, of course, depends on what kind of PEDs you're on, for sure. Some have a greater impact psychologically, and, some people need to taper down, which I think can be very effective for reducing that,
Mhm.
and also for your vital organs and systemically from a clinical perspective, things
Mhm.
like T3, you probably wanna cycle down, but again, it depends on you individually and what your coach recommends for you.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't really I don't get that I think I get more blue that like the season's over. I feel like,
Yeah.
oh man, like you look forward to seeing your friends and making new friends and traveling to a different city maybe, and
Yeah.
then it's like, what do I do now? It's kind
Mhm.
of like your world revolves around bodybuilding for so many months and then it's over.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you.
And interestingly enough, it's sort of like cancer. When I was going through cancer treatment, your world is about cancer. So when your cancer is gone, you're like, well, what do I do now? Like, how do
Yeah.
I live my life normally? Because it's been about the cancer for, 3 years and now it's not. So what do I
Yeah.
do?
Uh-huh.
So similarly, it's sort of a similar mental transition. And I think that's when having friends that go through the same transition and talking it out is really helpful. And, podcasts like this or community forums where people can talk it out, really important for people.
Yeah. I agree. No, yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
Yep.
Um, Now, in terms of your cancer, tell me a little bit more about that in terms of when were you diagnosed and was it yeah, just a little bit more detail on that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was in 2019. I was actually prepping for Pittsburgh,
Uh-huh.
and routine mammogram. And I was always very good about prevention, thank God. I don't have a family history of it. There were no symptoms. So it was really a lightning strike. And, um, when they made the diagnosis, it was 3 weeks before I was to go on stage in Pittsburgh.
Mm.
And I said, to my
Hmm.
oncologist, okay, well, how aggressive is this thing? Because I've been prepping all year. I want to go to Pittsburgh. And
Yeah.
she said, it's early stage 2. We realistically can't get you in for surgery or do anything until at least 3 weeks anyway. So go do your thing, come back, and we'll figure it out. So I did, I went and I did my thing. And that year I was placed second again in figure. So I came
Okay.
back with
Oh.
a win, but it wasn't, I think it was sort of telling me you got to move in another direction. Um,
Hmm.
and then after I came back, literally the following week, I had a bilateral mastectomy, had both breasts removed, even though the
Okay.
cancer was in just the right breast. I said, you're going to take them both because I'm not going to deal with this left breast, bothering me and possibly killing me 5 years from now. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
got you. I understand.
and so there were several tumors. So they when they take the breast, they take the whole darn thing. They
Okay.
take the nipple, they take everything. So it was a little traumatic, to
Yeah.
see your body. I still had like, yeah, I was still pretty ripped from Pittsburgh. So, looking at myself in the mirror with, these bags hanging off and scars and sutures. And it was,
Mhm.
it was, it was definitely an aha moment. you know?
Yeah, I understand.
And I thought, okay, I realized, I think at that moment, looking in the mirror, that well, my breasts definitely don't define me as a woman or as a human. So, all right, I think things are going to be okay. I didn't have like a breakdown over it or anything. Um, and then I started the chemo, and that was actually, outside of having to shave my head. I didn't really get sick during chemo. I didn't feel great, but I was in the gym, bald headed and everything. And,
Really?
I
Wow.
remember my trainer saying, "Are you supposed to be in here?" I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you have to adjust your workouts accordingly, but the physical activity and my connection with bodybuilding is what kept me mentally strong."
That's great.
And,
Yeah.
they used to joke about me in the chemo ward because I would bring exercise bands and I'd be lunging up and down the hallway with that stupid thing hooked up to me getting my chemo. And
Wow, really?
remember people saying, like, this woman isn't, she's not, she's out of her mind. And, before you know it, I was finished with treatment, the hair starts coming back. You realize that, I just think it's a defining moment for women. It's very different. For me, I learned that, I'm a Christian, obviously, and I believe that, God taught me a lesson about, okay, look at yourself in the mirror. You don't look the same, but you feel the same.
Mhm.
So that's a good thing. Like, I felt like the same person I always was.
Yeah, I
And it was sort
understand.
of a clean slate, and I started over. And then, I had my reconstruction. Obviously, my hair's back. And, 2 years later, I was on the same stage winning two overall. So it was sort of a come full circle moment for me.
Yeah. Okay.
If I never did another show after that, I would have been good.
Uh-huh.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was very interesting, and then I've been very involved in, breast cancer advocacy, particularly with athletes and
Okay.
young girls who, think that they're immune to this stuff, and that I think over 70% of cancers in general are not tied to a genetic predisposition. It's mostly environmental. So it could have been,
Yeah.
who knows, it could have been a birth control pill I took 30 years ago that
Mhm.
caused breast cancer. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so I think you have to prepare yourself mentally for that. You have to get help. You have to seek out help. You have to have a strong support system. Um, and I had none of those things. It was during COVID, and, actually, when I got the diagnosis, I was married at the time, my husband left.
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so, fortunately, we didn't have children together, but I
Yeah.
went through that entire experience during COVID, with my dogs and, friends and stuff like that. But
Wow.
so that sort of added a layered challenge to the whole thing,
Yeah,
and
I
you
understand.
you really have to be emotionally strong and prepared to push through that. But there is life after that,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
for
I
sure.
I was curious, I hope you don't mind me asking this, but I was curious before you had the cancer and the mastectomy, did you have implants? Because I know, a lot of bodybuilders have implants.
I did, yep, I mean, everybody, I think, it's kinda common, I did. And of course, now, obviously, I have them because I don't have breasts anymore. So,
Mhm. Yeah,
but yes, I did, and obviously they removed the implant with the breast. And then,
yeah,
there's a process, because if you lose your nipple, you have to stretch out the skin again to accommodate an implant. So over several weeks, they expand it by putting like a temporary implant in.
yeah,
And that was
uh-huh,
probably the most painful part, is stretching the skin week
yeah,
over week, in
okay,
increasing. um but your body's amazing. It bounces back quickly, and it wants to be better.
mhm.
So I think, because of that, I was able to, I ended up in a good situation.
Yeah, that's cool. I
Yeah.
was just curious. I've heard of ladies that had the implants, then they leaked, and then they caused health issues. But do you think that they could have? contributed to your breast
No,
cancer? Or
not at all,
no?
not at all. Honestly,
No.
I think, again, every case is very different.
Yeah.
My case, they found nothing wrong with the implants at all.
Okay.
They examined them. Their inclination, although they didn't want to say, was that, I was on a high dose estrogen-based birth control pill for many years,
Yeah.
like we
Okay.
all were.
Yeah.
So, that was probably a large contributor to why my type of cancer was called a HER2 positive estrogen based cancer.
Oh, I
So
see.
there
Okay.
aren't a lot of things that can do that to you except for estrogen. So,
Yeah. I gotcha. I understand.
so yeah,
Yeah.
so there, and again, environmental, anything that you're putting in your body, whether it's medicine or food or whatever,
Hmm.
could be toxic. And I don't know if that's in fact what it was, but in
Sure.
doing a lot of research, that kind of it would be logical to I think assume that that could have been the culprit.
Well, it's good that you got it discovered early and were able
Yeah,
to rectify it. And it's good that you didn't get so sick from the chemo too, because I've heard a lot of people get nauseous and just feel kind
I
of shitty.
didn't. I had some fatigue. It wasn't
Uh-huh.
great, but I did lose my fingernails, which was very painful.
Oh,
They
yeah.
fell off. My
Oh,
toenails fell off. Um,
wow. Huh.
yeah, I did not know that that would be a side effect. It's
Yeah.
different for everyone, but
It's
that was not great.
kind of like losing your hair, right? I mean, in that
Yes.
regard. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's alarming. When you're pulling chunks of your hair out, you're like, all right, it's time to shave my head.
Yeah.
And then your fingernails, it's very painful when you don't have fingernails,
Yeah.
you have to cover them because you'll get an infection. So
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
harsh, it is a harsh experience, to go through for
I
sure.
bet.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, like I said, I'm glad you're still with us. And
me
so,
too.
yeah.
Me too. Definitely.
Now, I did have a few more questions for you, but are you good time-wise, or
Yeah,
how are
I
you
have a
doing?
few more minutes, so let's go. Sure.
I just want to talk to you about, having a PhD in public health and your work as a statistician. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure many years ago if I was going to go the medical school route or a research route. And
Mhm.
my mother was Japanese. She's passed away. My father was French, and most Asian Japanese mothers, they want you to become a doctor. It seems like the thing to do,
Yeah.
right? Um, was just never really drawn to that.
Uh-huh.
But I was very much into research, and I loved learning and I loved writing. And so that kind of led me in the direction of getting a PhD. And I thought that there might be some opportunity to either teach at the university level, which I've done,
Hmm.
write clinically, which I do, or work in the private sector, which I also do. So I've been able to do a lot with that credential. And again, most of my research now is large corporations, population health management, because it is important and companies want to reduce the amount of money they're spending millions of dollars on sick employees.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
by far their biggest expense is
Hmm.
human capital. And so
Yeah.
they have to find ways to reduce healthcare costs, and they have to understand the trends in their population health in order to make adjustments. And
Okay.
this
Yeah.
is how they structure their benefit plans. So I'm a
Mhm.
big part in advising them how to do that based on what I see in their data.
Do you help advocate for prevention programs, like in terms of
Yes.
healthy
Yes, I
eating
do. I
and
always make recommendations for wellness initiatives and programs, and I've been received a number of awards for programs that I've developed for large companies, and most recently I had a private client in Grand Cayman that's solicited my services based on an article I wrote in Forbes online about this very topic about employee wellness and how companies need to spend more time and effort on dedicating resources specifically to healthcare cost reduction. And so it's been a very lucrative and very interesting career, because I didn't think it was going to end up in a corporate sector, but I did. And, I think when people get a PhD, they either go into research, specifically clinical research, or they go the university route. And, as we all know, universities can be very bureaucratic and political, and
Mhm.
I don't get into that stuff either. So
Yeah,
sometimes I'll dabble in some online teaching or, like that, and I do enjoy that. But the bulk of my career has been in research, and sort of developing these initiatives for large companies.
that's terrific. That's really fascinating. I think that's great. That's
Yeah, it's
really interesting
interesting.
work. I
Yeah.
bet we're kind of rewarding too, I think. So
Yeah, it is for sure. It definitely is. When you see the needle move and companies are spending less and people are investing in their own wellness, it's validating, and it's a real thing. It's not Wellness is not just a word we say, it's something that people have to live by.
Mhm.
It's a real phenomenon that affects everything in our lives, so
Yeah.
we should be paying attention.
That is one thing I liked about what RFK Jr.'s been saying recently is talking about getting rid of the junk food or not, don't allow EBT to pay for junk food. Use it to pay for real food.
Yeah, let's just start by taking the poisons out of our food because it's not allowed in Europe. So why should it
Hmm.
be allowed here? Well, that's a whole different podcast. Now we get pharmaceuticals involved. And, we live in a culture in this country where, pharma wants us sick.
Yeah.
Pfizer, I read an article the other day about Pfizer. They've been in business for almost 100 years. They have not cured one disease.
Mm.
So what
Mm.
does that tell you? They haven't cured anything. They just keep people on medicine. They keep
Mm.
people on medicine. You just keep feeding the machine. So the sicker you make people and the younger you make them sick, the longer they're going to be on medication. So
Yeah.
yeah, does it make sense from their perspective? Of course it does. Of
Hmm.
course it does. But let's hope for some change on that.
I agree with you on that. No, I think and I'm glad that, RFK Jr. is kind of raising that and making people aware of that issue too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just so interesting that some people are so pissed off about a ripped 70-year-old guy wanting to make America healthy. Like,
hmm.
why are you pissed off about that? Like, you know, what's wrong with that? I mean, like, I would be
Yeah.
totally happy with that. So I don't know,
Yeah.
it's very interesting world we live in today.
Yeah, he's in good shape, that's for sure. He could
He's
probably step on.
jacked. I mean, I'm sure he's on TRT or something, but he's still jacked. He looks
Yeah,
great.
he could probably be up there on the bodybuilding stage, actually. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Um, no, that's very cool. Um, I just was curious in terms of social media, do you ever find it hard to deal with the demands of social media?
No, because I have a very clear boundary.
Yeah,
I don't get political. I don't judge people. I'm mostly an observer. Sometimes I'll post, here or there, but I don't get into, the toxic elements of what social media offers, even with regard to bodybuilding. I just
yeah.
don't. I mean, it's
Hmm.
a great tool if you know how to use it.
Hmm.
Many people don't.
Hmm.
So they become, it's all consuming. And, I learned long ago that I'm not going to let social media dictate my happiness. I dictate my own happiness and I will share what I want to share. And things that I find disturbing, I either, don't follow or I don't respond to, react to. It's all about choices.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no, I'm not bothered by demands at all. I mean, I think social media is a blessing, but it can also be a curse.
Yeah. I call it anti-social media sometimes because
Exactly. That's exactly what I post a lot of pictures of my dogs, and some of my bodybuilding pictures, but these guys are very photogenic and they love to be in front of the camera. So, I
they
do
are,
Fireball and Mojo get a lot of attention on social media. And
oh,
you know
they're
what?
very,
They make people happy. So if they make people happy, great.
oh, they're adorable too. Yeah, they're so cute. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting as a bodybuilder too, because you're dealing with some kind of nasty trolls, but you can also deal with on the opposite spectrum, the overbearing fans. So, you gotta learn how to,
Guess what though? That's why you have block and delete. It's
yeah,
beautiful. People don't utilize that enough. I love it. I mean, no, okay, you're going to be weird, block, delete. That's it. Simple, done. I don't need to engage in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I gotcha.
I
Yeah.
do like to connect with other athletes that I know that might be competing in shows. So when we meet face to
Mm.
face, it's super cool to get to meet them. And, you find out that, like, even though we're in a competitive environment, we're very much on the same team. We
Yeah.
all support one another quite a bit. And I like that about social media for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is. It's nice to be able to connect, and bod-
Absolutely.
bodybuilding is kind of a niche community anyway, but
Yes.
to be able to connect with people, and probably Instagram's probably the best for bodybuilding anyway in terms of,
Yes.
social media. So yeah.
Agree. Yeah, agree. But it really allows us to stay connected with people that we've met at different competitions or even
Yeah,
competed against. And if they live in Texas or Puerto Rico or, overseas, you can stay connected with them. And it's really nice. I mean, I really enjoy that.
that's cool. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. Um, Now I was curious if there's anybody that you'd like to shout out before we end the
I
interview.
mean, other than, look, Shelby Starnes has been just an incredible support system, and I'm not pushing his coaching, but, for a female athlete who's a cancer survivor, this guy's never put me in harm's way. I trust him implicitly.
Right.
Kenny Wallach is amazing. Some of my girlfriends, Annie Brown, Andre Arsenault, they're both IFBB pros. They've been, Edith Driver, another IFBB pro. She just qualified for Masters Olympia. Great
Hmm.
women, amazing women, strong women, just wonderful people. And my trainer, Josh Freeman, he's out of a small local gym, Iron University. Aldo Paredes is pretty well known on social media. He is the boyfriend of Laura Lee Chapados, who, she's always, we see her daily pretty much at the gym. She's lovely too. So they've been like a family. It's a small kind of family, but really supportive and just really want to see you enjoy the process regardless of where you end up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, was Miami Broward seems like a good, pretty strong bodybuilding community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely. I mean, I think it's grown tremendously. But for sure we have a lot of great promoters in Florida, that
Hmm.
are putting on some great shows like Serge Sarek. He's all over. But he's based here in Florida, Tim Gartner, Mike Matassa. So you've got some good Gary's up north, but
Yeah.
you've got some great promoters and great shows in Florida. And who doesn't want to come to Florida? I mean,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I
70
know.
degrees today. It's gorgeous.
It is. It's beautiful and sunny. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. I live
Yes.
in Tampa, so, and Tampa's got a good bodybuilding community too.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yes, definitely. MI40 and all the folks there. I mean, it is a great community. It's a tight-knit community.
Yeah. I was curious, do you have any sponsors, or are you interested in having sponsors?
I did, I don't really seek that out. I've been approached by a few companies, but I don't like obligations like that. I kind of like to
Yeah,
do my own thing. And,
sure.
I was sponsored by a supplement company for several years. And I just don't, if I'm not using the products and I don't really believe, I just don't, I'm not that way. I prefer doing my own thing, this way I can as a bodybuilder, with a professional person, I budget for my stuff. I have a very robust budget for bodybuilding because it's not cheap. And
Yeah,
so for that reason, I'm not looking to attach myself to anybody. I have the freedom to do what I want. And I
yeah,
don't have to answer to a sponsor. And sponsorships are great, but I guarantee you that the bulk of the people that are sponsored by a company don't always use their products. They're
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
wearing the name and the t-shirt, but I don't roll like that.
yeah. I gotcha. I
I
understand.
never have, so I march to the beat of my own drummer. And I will preach all day about my coaching, my training, my trainer, my posing. But other than that, I don't really need a sponsor, so
I gotcha. I understand.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I did want to give a quick shout out to the Bad Rap ladies who got my Bad Rap shirt on.
I
Although,
see that.
but,
Cool.
but that's Eunice and JoJo, and they're both, I think they're both in their late 50s also, but they're both competitors, but they started a clothing company to help sponsor some of the bodybuilders, and so I really like what they're doing because they're focusing on the women too. So
That's cool. I'll have to
yeah.
check them out. Yeah, for sure. That's always nice, but there's always like a catch, and like people want you to sponsor, but then you have to buy some product. Like I'm not doing that. I want to focus on competing and that's it. Just look better than I did last show and I'm happy.
Yeah, I got you. Totally understand. I think
Mhm.
Bad Rap's better than some of the other sponsors. I think
Oh,
they're,
for sure. Yeah. There's
yeah.
a lot of, yeah, yeah. And again, that's the industry, and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Jeanette. I was wondering if you'd mind doing a quick flex for me.
sure thing. Not
Yeah.
bad for 59 years old.
You look amazing. Yeah, totally. You look great.
There is
And
life after 50 and
oh yeah, and you look beautiful too. So
after cancer. So don't let that stop you, for sure.
no, I agree. No, you're very inspiring and yeah, you look great and no, definitely and best wishes
Thank
to you
you.
for
Yeah, I would
next
love to
year.
chat with you again. I mean, there's a bunch of topics we could talk about, but we can certainly explore that offline.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Yeah, that'd be great.
Definitely,
Yeah.
for sure.
No, and I really appreciate your time for this interview and I'll probably get this posted here relatively soon. So of course I'll tag
Great.
you.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out, and it was a pleasure speaking with you, and I'll definitely stay connected with you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Jeanette. And
Thank you
yeah,
so much. Have a great day.
thank you.